Walter, what does your wand look like?
Well, Michele, as a CPA and representing our society, I look at where we are now, and as someone who looks at the state's financial statements, has anyone ever looked at the state's audited financial statements? Kind of thought so. Well, you can easily find it on the state's website, and it's called Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and it's issued every June 30th. So the June 30, 14 financial, which is issued somewhere in the winter of 15, if you look at what's called the MD&A, and those of you that work in the public company space understand what an MD&A is. So if you look at the debt of our state, and I'm talking the bonded and the non-bonded debt, we've got to get a grip around the debt. Because since, and I'm not blaming any legislator or governor for this, it's just the way it's happened in the last 30 years. The debt since 2008 has climbed from $38 billion to now over $74 billion in 2014. And I believe there was a report from the Treasurer's Office this past summer that the debt is somewhere hovering in the area of $95 billion. So my question is, at what point does that become unsustainable? And I think the uncertainty of the business community is around where we're going long term. We're going to have to make some very difficult choices long term and stop focusing on nothing more than a budget, which is an annual plan of how we're going to raise revenue and spend money.
Yeah.
That's really, I think, a critical issue for me.
Thank you. Long term is all about, it's all about Michael?
I'm managing partner of a law firm. We have offices throughout the state. We have offices in Cherry Hill, Jersey City, Newark, and Roseland. Believe it or not, we just opened up an office in Newark, so we do believe in Newark.
Congratulations.
But I also represent a lot of people in the construction industry and the real estate industry. And essentially, you know, our revenues 2014, 2015 are flat. Top 20 firms in New Jersey, the revenues are flat. The construction industry, I mean, Bernie's right here. I spoke to Bernie before, and you know, his unemployment rate's about 8%, electrical union, 8 to 10%, more commercial than residential. So their business is basically flat. The real estate industry has pockets. The office industry is flat. The industrial industry is seeing growth. The thing we need to keep in mind about New Jersey, we have a tremendous location, and there are probably between 90 to 100 million people between Washington, D.C. and Boston. We're centrally located. And there's big demand to push goods into the distribution space in central Jersey. So there is growth there. The vacancy rate's only 7%, unlike the office market, which is 25%. So you kind of see up and down pockets. And so at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, you know, why would someone come to New Jersey and invest? Why would you want to grow? And I think a lot of it has to do with confidence in the economy. I think a lot of people running a business, whether it be small, whether it be medium-sized or big, they really have to feel that their growth indicators in the economy, and also too that the headwinds are kind of under control. I mean, Walter talked about, you talk about taxes, healthcare, pension reform. I mean, there ought to be a legitimate debate to try to reach resolution on those issues. And so at least, you know, your business leaders feel, okay, these issues are being tackled and there's growth. I mean, you have a lot of people here, a lot of people want to work hard, but they have to believe that the economy is going to move forward.
Thank you. Joel, I know you have a big magic wand.
Well, you know, if I just take the economist's approach to things, it really is an amplification of, one, what I talked about, and two, the comment about the long term versus the short term. We spend, especially when we're in crisis, and we seem to go from one crisis to another in this state, and we put the Band-Aids on, and usually the Band-Aids aren't even big enough. And we give no thought to what we're doing and whether what we're doing really makes any sense in terms of creating this foundation for growth. And that's really why I came up with those ideas of looking at the trends that are out there. We need to stop the short-term, constant, almost pinballing from one place to another, and at least at some point say, even if we have a short-term solution, does it make sense in the long term? And look at those factors that will make the state's business environment better. And really, and better not just in the issue of taxes, but in terms of structure. To me, it's all about the structure of the economy, so that it can grow more rapidly. And we just don't do that. We're too short-term focused right now.
Yeah. You know, long-term planning is a challenge because we're always on the brink of another election, and that always makes it very difficult. So when you use the term comprehensive or you even use the term planning, people tend to shy away. So, Jim, you talked about North Carolina treating folks like a god in terms of job creation. The recent job numbers in New Jersey have been very promising. What are the underlying factors that are leading to improvement in creating jobs in New Jersey?
Yeah, the recent job numbers have been promising, and that in itself is promising, given the broad megatrends that we're operating in. Essentially, New Jersey has most of its economic eggs in the suburban basket. We are the most suburban of states. Let me just throw some job numbers out at you. In the great era of suburbanization from 1950 to 2004, New Jersey went from half the size of New York City to 13% larger over that 54-year period. So we added 2.3 million jobs in that slightly more than half a century. New York City added just 85,000, 2.3 million to 85,000. Fast forward to the current, what I call post-suburban era, 2004 to 2014. New York City has gained 5.5 million jobs, or 550,000 jobs in that period. New Jersey's lost 37,000. So we have those headwinds that we're facing. But this year, the job creation in New Jersey did improve drastically. I think two major reasons. One is the negative effects of Superstorm Sandy really hit the 2013 job numbers, and then the resizing of Atlantic City's casinos for a post-monopoly world really impacted 2014. So those two events are attenuating right now. So New Jersey in 2015 is about to have its best job growth year since the expansion began.
Thank you, Jim. Very important for business to be attracted to the state of New Jersey and their ability to function is access to capital. And I know we hear oftentimes from our members that access to capital has become a significant issue. Walter, how would you characterize the current environment for business in obtaining financing?
Michele, it's been extremely challenging. I worked with a client for the last 2 years relocating his business from Linden to Kenilworth, and the amount of red tape, not just from the towns, the cleanups involved, the difficulty securing financing. The bankers in the room will tell you how challenging it is to get a loan done these days because of the oversight, Dodd-Frank, dotting the I's, crossing the T's. It's really been a challenge for small businesses to get access to capital for expansion. And a lot of small businesses are concerned about expanding. We've had a lot of people that have been deleveraging since the recession, really trying to pay debt down. Even though it is a very attractive rate environment, it's been very challenging for businesses to obtain access to capital, both permanent capital, mortgage financing, commercial financing, as well as
Well, what solutions can we offer in terms of what are the options to, is it that the company needs to do more in and of themselves to make them better from an underwriting process, so there's some opportunities for them there, or is it that there are some alternative funding mechanisms that are at play for companies these days?
Well, we've got a number of programs, as a lot of you know, with Choose New Jersey and those types of things, EDA lending, small business lending. But again, underwriting has gotten dramatically more difficult from the banker's perspective. And again, the bankers in the room can chime in later on during the Q&A about how difficult it is. But I talk to middle market lenders all the time, and they all say that it's very difficult to put a deal on the table today. And the questions you get back from credit and underwriting, it's a challenge, and it's a challenge for the customer to document all the needs and requirements of securing that loan.
Yeah, I think it's a shame. We hear all the time in the industry the whole idea of having done a deal on a handshake from years ago, and the ability for small business particularly. This has been a significant challenge. Mike, you talked about business confidence. We always talk about the importance for our members with business confidence and the need for political and regulatory predictability and certainty. Is that confidence in the economy? Is confidence in the economy a discernible factor for business?
Well, 2 points. First, on the regulatory side, we're a home rule state, so there's we're obviously a heavily populated state. There's just simple over-regulation. And, in a lot of states where New Jersey chooses competing, everything's done on a county level. Here, everything's done kind of on a town level, city level, and then a county level, and then a state level, depending on agencies involved. And, a lot of the rules are written to protect the environment or protect runoff, whatever the case may be, but at the end, which make a lot of sense. But a lot of the rules are Byzantine, and there's not a lot of rationale why people sit in cubicles and pass these rules. But they make it the impact of these decisions make it very, very difficult, like Walter said, for a business to expand, for a business even to grow. And I think there needs to be listen, the regulations are here to protect the citizens of New Jersey, but there needs to be a balance in the regulations that really make economic sense. The other thing is, too, in terms of, from a business standpoint, they really look at the political leadership. And, everyone lives within this playing field and in these rules. And if the political leadership in different pockets of the state is pro-business, things tend to happen despite the Byzantine rules. I mean, you look at Hudson County, you look at Jersey City. I mean, you took an aerial view of Jersey City now against lower Manhattan. There's probably been 10 times more development in Jersey City. Why? Because you can go into New Jersey City with a site plan, and the town, like North Carolina, welcomes you. I mean, obviously, they're concerned about development in the city, but there's been tremendous growth. But the attitude of the county and the city officials is to grow. And obviously, that's political leadership that's kind of pushing that. You can look at Camden right now. I mean, there's tremendous development that's going to happen in Camden, which has been a very, very poor, underutilized city for years and years. But, you have the Economic Opportunity Act, you've got business initiative tax incentives, and a lot is going to happen in Camden in the next 5 or 10 years. And that, to me, is just political leadership where people made a commitment to an urban community and we're going to build. But if you want to expand a business in Camden, not hard to do. You want to do it in Cherry Hill, it's a different story. So, I think the political leadership really needs to be on the same page as the business community, and you can really see growth.
Well, and let's stay on that, because Camden is a really great case study right now for strong economic growth, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And tone at the top, let's take it all the way back up to the top. This administration, the Grow New Jersey program, and a focus on an urban center like Camden. So how is the incentive program? A lot of folks, we hear a lot of people being negative about the incentive programs in the state of New Jersey, and yet Camden, I think, would not be appreciating the success it is right now if it weren't for those programs. Do you care to comment?
The incentives are there to grow. I mean, obviously, the people get the incentives are happy. The people who don't. I mean, we moved to Newark, right? We moved an office, moved 20 lawyers down there. We spoke with New Jersey Choose. Bernie set it up, and we got nothing. But, we're not Panasonic.
Bernie, what happened?
But you came anyway.
That's right. We came anyway. We were too small. But Panasonic came, and that area in Newark is really, and we felt that way, and we believe in Newark. It's not quite Jersey City, but we think there's a positive future there. It's a major transportation commercial center in this state. And so we went back. We're not in the Panasonic building, but the Panasonic building is a wow.
Yeah.
And what Prudential just did is a wow. They just spent $500 million. And so they've made a huge commitment to Newark. The administration in Newark has changed. We went in to get permitting, COs. It was like being in Jersey City. I really mean that, too. It's just a totally different attitude in terms of how the leaders in that town now view business. So that, getting back to your question, Michele, on incentives, yes, they're there. I think they do make a difference because people may make a business decision based on sales tax credits, whatever the income tax credits. And, people may roll the dice and say, okay, I will make an urban, despite the safety issues, I'll make an urban investment.
But the money alone without the political leadership in order to build the confidence. You need it all, right?
Exactly.
Good. Anyone else care to comment on the incentive program?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, again, the incentive program can work as long as there's a rationale on what's being incented. One of the issues that, when you talk about the criticisms of the programs is that the incentive program is just out there without an idea of what makes sense within the context of the community. Should we have been spending more money incenting the legal group or a different group to come in? I mean, how do you grow Camden? How do you grow any of our urban communities that need a lot of assistance? So, what I find if I would criticize it, is that I don't necessarily find an economic rationale on why a particular business, for example, might have gotten a particular incentive. And that just goes back to this idea of developing a long-term strategy of what fits both best and what creates the most growth in the circumstances.
Could I make a?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I agree with Joel. In addition, the tax system is so biased in New Jersey that you need those incentive programs just to put us on a level playing field with our competitors. If you don't have them, we're not going to get a lot of economic activity. Second, I think in terms of if we were to target them or potentially restructure them, we should really direct a great share of the incentives at companies that have world markets, as distinct from companies whose market is solely New Jersey. If you're serving world markets or national markets, you're an externally supported industry. And a typical example of that was AT&T at its peak. AT&T had a monopoly on long-distance telephone services. New Jersey accounts for 3% of the nation's population. Therefore, 97% of its revenue came from out of state from the rest of the country. So that was a wealth-creating activity, huge dollar flows into New Jersey. Those are the types of economic activities we really need.
It's a great point, absolutely. And I want to jump back to this whole term of rationalization, because this term has come up many, many times today. And we talk about tax structure being complicated, lacking rationalization. At what point in time does it become more rational, unfortunately, to give up? And this comes back to the issue of migration, and especially, Joel talks about this a lot. We debate a lot this issue of out-migration and who it impacts. And Joel always says, for those who can choose to avoid, they will. And what does that mean? So Joel, with this lack of rationalization, for those who can choose to avoid, do they, and why?
Well, as a starting point, you're creating the basic incentive for a business person to ask the question, should I even stay here? I mean, part of the irrational nature of it is you created, as we see from all the surveys, the dissatisfaction with the situation. Location decisions are lumpy. You don't make them every day. You don't make them every year. But when you create an irrational system where somebody says, I just can't live with this, if they've lived with it long enough, it gets to a point where they can, where if they can make a change in location, they're going to make that change in location. And that's really the problem with the system. We don't recognize, because it's not a constant kind of process, that the irrational nature of the taxes and really the unfair nature of the tax system creates certain kinds of disincentives to remain in the state. And not everybody can do that. Not every business person can do that. Not every business person is able to avoid the tax. And whether it's a business person when they're still living here and working here or retired, you always create cut points in which they ask the question, should I stay or should I go? And too often the irrational nature is, I should go. But there's also this fairness issue. And it's a debate that economists have, and I know Jim and I sometimes come down on opposite sides of it, is within when you create enough incentives. For example, if you were incented to move into Newark, your law group would have a relative cost advantage over all those other law groups that didn't have the tax advantage. Mm-hmm. So you are, in essence, creating winners and losers. That's the first thing about it. The second thing, which I think people just don't recognize, and it's one of my favorite sayings, is there's no such thing as a free tax cut. Okay? If you have to raise money, it's got to come from somewhere. If one group doesn't pay the taxes, everybody else has to pay the taxes. This isn't politics. This isn't economics. It isn't finance. It's like I say to my son, it's not even advanced arithmetic. Okay? That's what it is. So when you create these incentives, for one group, one firm, all other groups and all other firms pay those taxes. So if you're going to do it, you have to be really, really clear that there is a reason for doing it. Not just that you want a company there, but that company is indeed going to stay a long period of time and create not just jobs on its own, but act as what I like to call a growth pole, so that other companies are attracted to those areas and you have more than just that one company. Then it becomes financially, positive. But just without recognizing that there's a tremendous cost to those, you really do have an issue. And it creates a disincentive. It creates a level of unfairness that once again, when you have the location decision coming up in this lumpy manner, do I stay or do I go? If I can avoid it, I'm going to avoid it and I'm going to go.
And wouldn't that be the goal in the urban center, though, the whole idea of the trickle down, the catalyst? So you bring in the company, and then you start to see the neighborhood and the main street around it grow. Suddenly, those folks have to go out for lunch, and so there's the pizzeria. And you know what? The professional folks have their suits, and it's easier to get the dry cleaner on the way in, so they're going to the dry cleaner outside the building. I mean, isn't that how it works? Isn't that what's really behind the idea? Get the catalyst in there, incentivize the catalyst, and see Main Street grow?
I think that's absolutely right. And I think what Joel said is absolutely right, too. There is unfairness, but at the same time, if you're a city leader, county leader, and you want to drive opportunity in your town, basically probably is ever going to bring the most jobs is going to, the Panasonic Conifoli. I mean, it really wasn't a fair fight. But they're bringing a lot more jobs than we were. They're making a commitment to move out of Secaucus into Newark. They've also stabilized an area around Penn Station there. So there's a lot of benefit to the city from them being there. And then you have everything else in terms of, gasoline, dry cleaning, food, hiring local people. Because you're tending to get to hire local people from that, within the community. A lot of people don't drive, so transportation becomes an issue. So there are benefits to those communities around Newark because you're hiring their people and they're paying taxes. So,
Michele,
I mean, there's unfairness, but there's an end game, so.
Well, and Joel and Jim, I wanted to come to you because, Joel talked earlier.
Well, let me make one comment
Yeah.
on Joel's, there's no free
Okay.
tax cut. And this was an observation from many years ago from Bruce Coe, who one time was president of NJBIA. Tax not me, tax not thee, tax that fellow behind the tree.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to pick up, you heard, because we're talking about urban centers and the whole idea of developing Main Street. And Joel made reference in response to one of the questions before about, started on shifting demographics. And a lot of shifting demographics is really the space you talk about all the time. So not only is it about the job creation, but aren't the urban centers where the job creation is being incentivized where the millennials want to be as well?
Oh, absolutely. Joel is quite correct when he says millennials really are different. Arrogant, entitled, but annoyingly indispensable. And companies are well aware of that fact, so they're locating in places that are acceptable for millennials. And so what we're seeing is really a contracting metropolitan perimeter. The three westernmost counties in New Jersey along the Delaware River, Sussex, Warren, and Hunterdon, once high flyers, have been population losers in the post-2010 period. And it's not New Jersey, it's the entire metropolitan region. 12 of the 25 suburban counties in the broad metropolitan region are now losing population and the like. Essentially, Brooklyn is draining the young demographic vitality of north central New Jersey. Their baby boom parents couldn't wait to get out of Brooklyn. The millennial children can't wait to get into Brooklyn. So the Hudson River waterfront is hot. That's where they want to be. One example, Merck still has its consumer products division located in Skillman in Montgomery Township, west of Princeton. They have to bus 500 millennials every day from the Hudson River waterfront out to that facility. They don't want to live out there. So millennials are the driving force, and we see a reconcentration. They want LWP environments, LWP, live, work, play environments. You don't have that in the plain vanilla suburbs.
So let me just say, at BIA, we love our millennials, and we've started a young professionals network for our millennials. And but we also know that it is really important that we have the infrastructure in the place in the state of New Jersey in order for those millennials to have employment in the way that they want to have employment in the future. So these are great comments and all the things that we continue to work toward together. I want to come back to the issue of taxes, decreasing taxes, tax equity, tax fairness. And Walter, I want to come to you and I want to talk a little bit about the dual death taxes in the state of New Jersey. You know, as I stated earlier, 67% of our Outlook respondents said that estate and inheritance tax play a major role in their decision making on their business for the future, and 66% that they will not have New Jersey be their domicile in retirement. How does the state provide relief from these dual death taxes without negatively impacting the general fund?
Right. Well, Michele, of our members, we have 15,000 CPAs, a member of our state society. Over 74% of our members that responded to our survey have advised the client to leave New Jersey in retirement if they're going to sell their business, if they're going to retire here. And 85% believe that those taxes affect the middle class as well, because just home ownership. I mean, what's the average home sell in New Jersey? We all, own homes, and the 675,000 exclusion is just ridiculous. And I know, Michele, we talked about this on our prep phone call, but don't quote me on the number, but I believe the state inheritance tax raise is about $400 million or less out of a $33 billion budget. There's got to be a way we can find a way to replace that through spending cuts, other taxes, et cetera, and make it equitable for business owners to stay here. There's a lot of family-owned businesses, middle market companies that are privately owned that are approaching that age where they've got to decide what to do with their business, and private equity is not always the exit for these companies. But there's a lot of that sitting on the sidelines in the last 5 years because they're waiting for valuations to come back. So we think there's going to be a tremendous number of businesses looking to sell or perhaps relocate somewhere else outside New Jersey. But there has to be a way we can find to replace those revenues with some other tax. And just talk about tax equity, about maybe 2 or 3 years ago around this time, we put out an op-ed at the Society about just business taxes. I mean, think about a business that's looking to expand, invest in new plant equipment. And usually in the first year to 24 months, those are going to throw off losses. We don't have an ability to capture those NOLs and carry them forward. It's very difficult for a business to see profits from those investments. You got accelerated depreciation in the first 2 years when you buy new equipment. The added cost, it takes a while for those revenues to catch up. So we've got to think about a way to, and that's a way to rationalize incentivizing a business to stay here and invest using those losses.
Anyone else want to comment on estate and inheritance tax? Okay, I want to open it up to the audience because I know you all have some questions for the panel, and then we can circle back with some more of my questions, but it's important that we get to all of you. We have some microphones floating around, so please raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone over to you. We have a question up front right here. Evan, you want to come up over here?
Yes, Joel, just the comment that you made, no free tax. I just wanted to get your opinion on the aggressive campaign that New York State instituted with the tax breaks for the companies and the overall effect of that being positive as far as obviously there's less tax coming from those companies, but the fact of the wages and everything else, does that override the lessening of the tax break itself? What is the effect, and do you believe that New Jersey should enter into a more aggressive program such as New York State did?
Well, part of it is in most of these projects, they usually are required to do a cost-benefit analysis. And you can look at the cost-benefit analysis and know whether it's going to make money or lose money pretty easily. When they do a 30-year project for $250 million and you make $110,000 over 30 years, you know that that's a loser, okay? That's fairly clear. So you can look at it. There are some projects that, as we talked about, if you do create the capacity for additional growth outside of just that particular company, you can frequently, over time, and then it's an extended period of time, recoup more than your cost, even on a potentially present value basis. A lot of the studies, I think, don't even use present value. They just add them up, which is, and the accountant will tell you, it's a nice way to fudge the numbers. But the question you need to ask on this no such thing as a free tax cut is the decision made more political than economic? And that's why I raised the question about the incentives. Do we do it for long-term growth reasons, or do we do it just to say, I kept the company there? Keeping the company there doesn't necessarily imply that you're going to have a long-term benefit to it. And that's, when I used to be a college professor, I used to say, if a location's a bad location, eventually the company will determine it's a bad location, no matter what you incent them to do.
I think a big challenge for us is we know the competition right at our borders. And we talk all the time about the need for competitiveness and advancing policy that keeps us competitive. And when we can't have a competitive structure underlying all of it, i.e. our tax structure not competitive, we need to mitigate to that. And we feel that the incentive program is the way to mitigate. On the location issue, Joel, we talk all the time about location, location, location. New Jersey's got it. We've got great stuff, and we're all willing to pay for it. And I don't think Ted Zangari is here yet, but if Ted were here, we're willing to pay a premium, but not a super premium. I think you've all heard Ted say that many times before, and at what point does it become a super premium? But we are challenged when at our borders, they are putting in these really attractive programs. And yet we have great growth coming back to Jersey City, right? I mean, Jersey City is capturing jobs right out of New York, and hopefully we can continue to see that trend. Anyone else want to comment? We'll go to another question. Other questions from the audience? Yes, Karen has a question up front, if we can bring a microphone up.
So we're going to have a legislator panel and the governor, and there's limited resources in the state budget. So weighing the whole issue of incentives versus tax cuts, where would you come out in terms of if you were speaking to the governor and saying to help the business community in New Jersey, where would you stand? What would your suggestion be in terms of specific tax cuts to make us more competitive versus incentives?
Who would like to jump in?
Well, let me say,
Forecasting.
let me just not answer directly in the respect that that's again a short-term, that's a policy decision. Obviously, that has to be made right now. But to the extent it doesn't, when I raise the point about there's no such thing as a free tax cut, it creates the element of unfairness and irrationality, and it creates higher taxes for some and lower taxes for others. And I don't know how the rest of the panel feels, but if you've got a state where, in general, the taxes the businesses are overtaxed and overburdened by the structure, you want to lower the structure completely. You don't want to the idea of ameliorating some of the problems while you can, in the specific cases you can with the incentives, makes sense. But the goal shouldn't be to run a tax structure on the basis of incentives because we're non-competitive. Is to lower the tax structure completely. But to do that, you have winners and losers. Those that are paying the lower tax would have to pay a higher tax. And the issue for the environment, the business environment, is how do we get that political decision? Because if we have a lower tax structure in general, we will be much more competitive. And we won't have to come up with all of these special kinds of deals. And the businesses that are already in the state will be better off. They won't, when it comes time for that location decision, the stay or will I stay or will I go, they'll stay a lot more because it's not as bad. They'll be paying that small premium rather than the high premium. So when we started this, your first question to me is to somehow stop the short-term Band-Aid approach and start saying, we got to lower the tax structure in general. I mean, that's the issue. And some people are going to get hurt for that because they've been benefiting from lower taxes because of special circumstances.
Yeah, let me make one.
Yeah, please jump in.
Yeah, to answer Karen's question, we shouldn't make it worse. number one. And I think one of the issues is the millionaire's tax, and that has been constantly raised. And that inhibits a lot of economic activity coming to New Jersey. Because if we're in competition with another state, the other states are going to be telling their clients or potential relocatees, if you go to New Jersey, there's going to be a millionaire's tax because it's constantly on the table there. And that is negatively impacting New Jersey in our competitive position when we have to play against New York, Pennsylvania.
And can I just say something? The millionaire's tax, the inheritance taxes, you know, in the issue of avoidance, if Pennsylvania doesn't have it, and you can move across the border,
That's
you
what
know, that's called avoidance. That's the simple. You don't have to move to Florida to avoid a millionaire's tax.
But it is, you know, it's
and
just
that's
the
same,
threat. It's
or
the-
the
yeah.
inheritance tax, I mean.
Well, and that's, we talk all the time, and you know, we said earlier, and you heard a million times, right? What do our businesses, what do you all want? You want predictability, you want certainty. And the more you have of that, the more you're inclined to reach in your pocket and make the investment. But when you're cautious about doing that, you step back and you don't spend. And the caution comes from things like the consistent threat in the state of New Jersey of a millionaire's tax.
Michele, I don't necessarily think it's a revenue problem in the state. I think it's an expenditure problem. And again, you have to look at where we're at as a state financially, and we are not improving our financial position. Our balance sheet is horrendous. I mean, I happen to compare it to the state of Pennsylvania this week, and for the same period ended, we had a negative net assets in New Jersey of $42 billion. Pennsylvania was about $8 billion to the positive. You have to look where we are, and we have to look at how we can have comprehensive reform of our system of government. I mean, from top to bottom. It's all levels. It's local, it's county, it's state. Because I just don't believe it's a revenue problem. I think it's we just have way too many things, commitments we have to meet, and somehow find our way to pay for them.
And Walter, I had asked you earlier, because when you talked about the whole idea of looking at the balance sheet, I asked you, is that really, is it a paradigm shift? Is it a different way that we need to be looking at how we plan for the future of the economy, and how do we get there? How do we make that paradigm shift?
Well, you know, that is where other states and governments, when they're looked at by the rating agencies, that's where they go. They look at the financials of the state or the local government, and you have to really look at where we are, and it's really scary when you look at the numbers. And again, there's two different ways to look at a government, the way we do financial reporting in government, so we have accounting standards to follow. It's called fund-based financials, which is really only looking at your current position, your current year, of what you spent and what's left over. And then there's a thing called government-wide financial reporting, which puts all assets and liabilities on the balance sheet for your governmental activities and your business activities. And if you look at those financials, it's really a scary picture.
Michele?
Yes, Mike.
One point just on incentives, and I know we've been talking about Panasonic, and obviously there are, I think, a lot of positive incentives on the Camden waterfront that I think, because it's proximity to Philadelphia, and I think you're going to, I think you, just like Jersey City, you're going to see, if this gets traction, I think you'll see growth in that sector. But not all incentives work out, to Joel's point, on a cost-benefit analysis. I mean, you look at Revel, I mean, the state committed $230 million in sales tax credits on equipment just to make that casino happen in an oversaturated casino market with competition from Philadelphia, Delaware, et cetera. So sometimes bad decisions get made on incentives, too. It's not to his point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think I saw a question in the middle. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm George Tobji. I work for KPMG in location analysis and site selection. I've been doing regional economic development for about as long as I can remember now. At the time when I started in New York City, New Jersey's attributes sold themselves. New Jersey was, it just came off the map why companies want to be in New Jersey. And that's no longer the case. There's no buzz in New Jersey. I speak to companies in New York City that are growing by 100, 200 jobs, tech companies, and you try to talk about the New Jersey proposition, it just doesn't resonate. A lot of the discussion we have here, the messaging is all a negative messaging about what's happening in New Jersey. And there's a lot more that can be done. State government, local governments, trying to enthuse what's happening with the millennials, with the new tech companies. It's not high cost. Boston, no incentives to go to Boston. Companies are sustaining the regional economy there. San Francisco, same thing. We're not capturing that on this side of the river. And it's part of the messaging that has to come out that's going to change this dynamic, because the messaging is all upside down right now.
Absolutely. And thank you
So-
for reminding us of that. And one thing, and when I did my presentation earlier, I think I stated I like to start on the positive and always end on the positive, because we have a lot to offer in the state of New Jersey. We have a lot of great things here, and we know that. It's not just about our location, it is our workforce, our skilled labor. I mean, this is an amazing place to do business, and I would put a plug in for Choose New Jersey, who is out there, marketing the state. Bernie and many of you in the room are involved with Choose New Jersey, getting that positive message out, because we have a lot to be proud of. Gentlemen, if there is one thing that you could highlight that is an attribute, a significant attribute to the state of New Jersey, the thing that you had to go and send that positive message across the country, what's the one thing you would say that New Jersey is best known for? Joel?
Well, I've highlighted a few of those, but I guess it would be, if you want to reach your market, this is the place to be.
Excellent. Mike?
I would say a highly educated, hardworking workforce that'll work 24/7.
Excellent.
Since Hinge is over here, I'll give them a plug. We are still the administrative capital of the global pharmaceutical industry.
And we need to tout that more.
Yes.
We do. Walter?
Well, I think as someone who was born and raised here, I think it's our quality of life, our access to services, our beaches, our shores. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else than right here.
Great. Other questions from the audience? I see one in the back.
Hello, Joe Coyle with the Edison Chamber. I also was a former owner of a 75-year bakery that we had to close on a retail level, but thank God we went to a small level in a warehouse, so we're still surviving. However, I visited Jersey City and different downtowns, and I see these pop-up markets. And when you talk about the strategy of different building developments and leverage of live, work, play, and I understand that, and I've witnessed it, and I think it's great. However, do you see any smaller retail plans of stores being smaller? Because it doesn't seem like the profit margin of retail rent could match the value of what the person makes in profit, if you understand my question. It's just, and I see this happening in Seattle, I see it happening in other areas where they have more of a different layout of the retail rather than just 2,000 square foot stores.
It's like anything else. I mean, it's the efficiency of the business, and if you can operate in much smaller space and be efficient, I think, and obviously that drives your cost down in terms of competitiveness, and I think that certainly will be a trend. In our business, in the law firm market, I would say most firms are reducing their footprint by a factor of 33%, because there's a lot of space that's just not properly utilized. I mean, firms are going to go to no more libraries, small offices, and with the next millennials, there's telecommuting. These kids are on computers 24/7. No need for secretaries. They do it all themselves. They can answer their own phone. So I think in terms of certain businesses, there's going to be downsizing and the need for space, and that's a retail example where someone can operate a bakery business and probably the machinery and the equipment is probably much more efficient than their ovens, et cetera. So all that does is drive your cost of operation down. So.
Does that mean good outlook for Main Street?
Yes, the retail market is more of a complicated issue because it's a bigger market. There's obviously e-commerce that's looming in terms of the bigger shopping centers, but I think that listen, as these towns start to grow in these communities, there are needs for these little businesses, and which is really what we need to see.
That's great. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think small businesses are trying to rationalize overhead costs all the time. Cost of healthcare, ACA compliance, that was the #1 issue, one of the top issues up here. That's been challenging for small businesses.
Other questions from the audience? Should we wait up front, Dean?
Jim, first of all, thanks for the shout out. You've all mentioned a number of different jurisdictions around the country: California, Massachusetts, Brooklyn, Pennsylvania, et cetera. In your travels, have you seen any particular, what I would characterize as best practices, besides just a lower tax rate, or something specific programmatically that we might look at as examples that we might look to for New Jersey as models?
Yeah, I think when we look at Cambridge, Massachusetts, Boston, the Bay Area, San Diego, and the like, they are as costly or more costly than New Jersey. But companies, pharmaceutical industries, life sciences are willing to pay that price because they have unique concentrations of previous higher education investment in the life sciences. And so you have an enormous number of academic superstars in all the higher education institutions in Cambridge. And we're paying the price in New Jersey for a lack of that investment. This comes from the shameless plug department at Rutgers. The new merger with UMDNJ and Rutgers and the like really does promise, and not quite an equivalent concentration of excellence in the life sciences, but certainly far better than what we had 5 years ago. And essentially the new institution ranks about 25th in the country, $700 million in contract research per year. If the synergies emerge as the full integration takes place, which is still going to take a couple of years, I think we'll be much more competitive in the life sciences, and hopefully we'll at least be mentioned in the same breath, or at least maybe just the tier below those super places.
If you're looking for best practices, the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia has been doing sister city studies where they take the business communities to a variety of different cities, and they've done it. You may want to contact them to talk about their best practices research. They're doing it on the basis of looking at Philadelphia and how Philadelphia can, operate better. And they've gone to Chicago and Toronto and Boston and a variety of other cities around the country and even in North America. So contact them, and I think you'd be able to get some information if you're looking for those kinds of research and information.
I think we have time for one more question, if there is one in the audience. Here we go. Charlene, up front, please. There's a mic coming.
Jim, you spoke about the growth in jobs for 2014 and 2015. However, Joel indicated the need for research and innovative jobs. Was there any growth in that area?
Yes, there was. I mean, it wasn't a huge spurt, but it was certainly positive.
There's one other interesting point, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, showing that there's something happening within the state that we may not be fully aware of. In 2013 and 2014, the labor force actually contracted in the state. For the first 10 months of this year compared to the first 10 months of 14, we don't have the full year, there's been a reasonable growth in the labor force. Now, a declining labor force is usually an indication of a sick or a weak economy, especially if it's a mobile economy like this. So we've seen that, and that's another kind of indication that either we're keeping people or attracting people. But have you seen that, and do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's the two unique events that occurred in 13 and 14. We had a really positive trend line starting in 2010, which was the first job growth year after the Great Recession ended. So 10, 11, 12 was actually a nice slope in terms of the private sector job growth. Silly me, I thought we had finally achieved economic liftoff. But Sandy did serious damage in terms of the shore economy. And not only in terms of out-of-state tourist dollars coming into New Jersey. New Jersey then exported its own tourist dollars going to other places. And then the very slow pace of rebuilding. So we have two really weak shore seasons. And then Atlantic City in 2014, the sheer scale of the layoffs, and virtually most of those people dropped out of the labor force related to the casino industry. So finally, in 2015, the positive trend emerged as you've just described it.
Good. And ending on a positive, that means a positive trend emerges and the outlook for 2016 is bright. Let's thank our panel for joining us today talking about the economy and state.